All right, welcome to the deep dive. Today we're going to try to answer a pretty big question. Like, what's the actual secret sauce to entrepreneurial success? You know, we're going to use your success book, V001.pdf file you sent over, to really break down two giants, Elon Musk and Steve Jobs. And you mentioned wanting to get up to speed quickly, but also really get into it, and I think we can do that. We'll ditch all the fluff and just get to the good stuff.
You got it. I mean, you've probably been following these guys for years, right? But even if you're just kind of curious about what made them tick, this deep dive is going to, well, it'll unearth those core leadership principles behind their massive success. And we want to give you those nuggets of wisdom you can actually use.
Cool. So this book is pretty cool. It takes this structured approach, comparing Musk and Jobs on these 10 leadership things. It uses case studies and even like some success metrics, to really measure their impact. It's not just saying, hey, they were awesome. It's more about how they actually did it.
Yeah, and that head-to-head comparison, that's key. By looking at those specific attributes and seeing how they played out in, let's be honest, the very different worlds of Musk and Jobs, we can start to see like these patterns emerge.
Yeah,
These principles that, they might just apply to anyone who wants to make a real difference.
totally. And that brings us to something you think of right away with both of them, visionary thinking. The book makes a big deal about this being like the foundation of their success. It's not just about managing companies. It's about picturing totally new realities.
Right. Absolutely. I mean, take Musk with SpaceX. His vision is to make humanity a multiplanetary species. Like, whoa. It's about preserving consciousness, protecting us against extinction. That kind of ambition, it's almost mind-blowing. But it's not just some far-off dream. He's taking those concrete steps to get there. Falcon rockets, Dragon capsules, the whole Starship program. It's all about this rapid prototyping.
Sure.
They build and test designs fast, learning from each attempt, like nonstop.
Yeah, and that rapid prototyping thing, it's not just about the engineering, it also fuels this like financially innovative approach. Building a space exploration business that's not totally hooked on government contracts, that's kind of unheard of, right? Plus, the way he's reignited this public passion for space, that's a big deal.
For sure, it taps into this deep human desire we have for progress and exploration, but also this concern for our future as a species. It's a really strong motivator, both for his teams and for like the whole world watching.
Now, Steve Jobs, his vision wasn't about leaving Earth. It was about how technology could like amplify human creativity. Think about the iPhone. It wasn't just a new phone, right? It was about humanizing tech, blending it with the arts.
Yeah, what Jobs got was that technology needed to be seamless, intuitive. So Apple had to control both the hardware and the software. That's what they call vertical integration.
Yeah.
And let them achieve this level of integration that nobody else could touch, leading to that user experience that, that Apple's famous for.
Totally. And design became this like core differentiator for them. That famous Jobs quote, "Design is how it works." That sums it up, right? And his focus, being able to say no to tons of good ideas, to stay laser focused on his vision, that was huge.
So when we look at their visions side by side, some things jump out. Both of them use what's called first principles thinking. They break down problems to their core truths. They also both had this reality distortion field thing going on. It's this ability to convince themselves and their teams that the impossible was actually doable. And they both baked technical and aesthetic stuff into their visions. And of course, they were both cool with failing along the way.
Yeah, those similarities are wild. But the book also points out a big difference. Jobs was all about the individual user and how they experience technology. Musk is tackling these huge existential problems facing all of us. Two totally different scales of vision, both incredibly powerful.
Right. Let's shift gears now and talk about another crucial thing. Resilience. Bouncing back from those tough times. Because honestly, building anything truly big, it's never a walk in the park. Both Musk and Jobs hit moments where it could have all ended.
No kidding. Musk's 2008 nightmare, man. Tesla and SpaceX were both like teetering on the edge of collapse, and he had sunk so much of his own money into them. I mean, that sounds like a total pressure cooker.
It was. The book goes into the intense pressure he was under, how close he was to losing it all. But instead of giving up, he doubled down, got personal loans, went for that one last SpaceX launch that could have made or broken them, scrambled for that last-minute Tesla funding round. It was crazy.
And then, boom, the Christmas miracle. SpaceX gets that NASA contract. Tesla gets a huge investment, all at almost the same time. It's hard to believe.
It shows his grit, for sure, but also his ability to keep his team and his investors believing when everything was super uncertain.
And then there's Steve Jobs getting kicked out of Apple, only to come back later. Man, being forced out of the company you built, that's gotta sting.
The book really digs into how much that rejection hurt him. But the crazy thing is how he spun it. He saw it as this chance to, like, start fresh, be a newbie again. That change in perspective, that was everything.
And he didn't just sit around moping. He built NextT Computer, and of course there's Pixar. NextT had its struggles, sure, but the tech they built there ended up being crucial to Apple's later success. And Pixar. Well, that's a whole other story.
Totally. So when Apple bought NextT and Jobs came back, it wasn't just a comeback. It was like this vindication of his vision and his ability to learn and grow from getting knocked down.
So looking at their resilience, the book points out some interesting differences in how they handled failure. Musk seemed to just dive deeper into the technical weeds, working harder to find solutions. Jobs seemed to take a more philosophical approach, using his time away to rethink his direction and how he led people.
It's also cool how they handled public perception of failing. Musk is pretty open about setbacks, even talks about them online. Jobs was much more private, controlling the story. This affected their teams, too. SpaceX and Tesla developed this culture where you try things, fail fast, and learn. Apple under Jobs was more about getting it perfect before releasing it.
But the big takeaway, according to the book, is that both of them saw setbacks as just bumps in the road, not reasons to quit. That unwavering commitment to their big goals, that's what stands out.
Totally. Now let's talk about innovation. For both these guys, it wasn't just something they did, it was part of their DNA. And their company's DNA, too.
Yeah, Musk's approach with Tesla is a great example of what they call first principles innovation. They didn't just tweak existing electric car tech, they basically reinvented it, questioning everything about how electric cars should be made.
It's interesting. Musk talks about starting from those fundamental principles instead of just copying what others are doing. For someone listening, that means questioning everything in your field, all those assumptions that everyone just takes for granted. And that vertical integration thing with Tesla controlling everything from the batteries to how they sell the cars, that came from that total rethink.
And Tesla's software focus, the whole over-the-air updates thing that changed the game, and the gigafactory concept, attacking the cost of batteries head-on, it all points to this drive to not just improve things, but to totally blow them up and start over.
It's like he wasn't just building a car company. He was trying to push the world towards sustainable energy using radical technology to get there.
Now, with Jobs and the iPhone, it was more about what the book calls innovation through integration. It wasn't one new technology, really, but this brilliant way of combining the iPod, a phone, and the internet into one seamless device.
Exactly. And the multi-touch stuff, the gestures you use to control it, that was a total game changer. And then the App Store, which wasn't even part of the original iPhone idea, became this massive platform that changed everything.
And Jobs was fixated on the user experience, making sure the hardware and software worked together perfectly. It wasn't just about having the latest features, it was about making it feel simple and even joyful to use.
So what were the core drivers behind their innovations? The book points to systems thinking, being able to see how all the pieces fit together and combine them in new ways. Also, being super focused, cutting anything that didn't support their core vision, and having this unshakable belief in their own ideas, even when everyone else thought they were crazy.
Right. But the book also points out a big difference in their innovation styles. Jobs was all about making the complex feel simple and beautiful. Musk's focus is on those massive engineering breakthroughs, pushing the limits of what's even possible.
Right on. Now let's dig into passion and commitment. You can't talk about these guys without talking about the crazy level of passion they had for their missions.
Definitely. Musk putting all his PayPal money into Tesla, even having to borrow money for rent. That's not just some calculated risk. It's putting everything on the line for sustainable transportation.
And remember when they were having all those problems making the Model 3? Musk stepped in as CEO, even slept at the factory. That kind of hands-on leadership, it sends a strong message. And then there's the whole thing with Tesla opening up their patents, putting the mission of electric cars ahead of their own competitive edge. That's serious commitment.
And again, the vertical integration, controlling all the key tech to make sure it fits his mission. He wasn't just building cars, he was building a whole system to support his vision.
Exactly. Now think about Steve Jobs coming back to Apple, the company he started and then got kicked out of. That decision, it was clearly driven by this deep need to finish what he started. It wasn't about ego or money. It was about the products he felt he had to create.
Yeah, taking that symbolic $1 salary, that says it all. When he came back, he was ruthless. Canceled 70% of their projects to focus on a few key things. That takes some serious conviction.
And even toward the end, He was making sure Apple would stay true to its mission after he was gone. That shows just how powerful his commitment was.
So, comparing their mission-driven approaches, the book highlights a few things. Both of them were all in. Physically, Musk on the factory floor, Jobs working like crazy even when he was sick. They were also both amazing at explaining their mission in a way that inspired people, and they just refused to compromise on those missions no matter what.
But their passions were different too. Jobs was passionate about blending tech and art, empowering creativity. Musk is more about humanity's survival and progress, using things like sustainable energy and space exploration. Different focuses, but both incredibly intense.
For sure. Okay, let's talk about something that's crucial for any leader. Communication. You can have the best ideas, be totally passionate, but if you can't explain them clearly and get people on board, you're not going anywhere.
Right. Steve Jobs was a master communicator, especially those famous Apple keynotes. They weren't just product launches, they were like carefully crafted stories.
Oh yeah, the three-act structure, the way he kept things simple and clear, no tech jargon, and those super minimalist visuals, one image, maybe a few words on a slide. It kept all the attention on him and his message.
And the way he'd set up a problem, this frustration, and then boom, Apple had the perfect solution.
Yeah.
He was so good at making you feel something, making you believe in his vision.
Now, Elon Musk is a different kind of communicator. He's all about that authentic, geeky passion, especially when he talks about SpaceX. He gets into the nitty-gritty technical stuff, but somehow he makes it understandable for normal people.
He's got this authority, like he's totally in the trenches with the engineers. And that genuine excitement he shows, it's contagious. It builds trust, especially with people who appreciate the technical details.
And the visuals he uses, all those diagrams and specs, it's the opposite of Jobs' minimalism. And then there's the way he's open about their screw-ups. That's pretty unique, and it makes him seem more believable.
So both guys were great at communicating their vision and getting people excited.
But they did it differently. Jobs was the polished storyteller, focusing on how the user benefits. Musk is more direct, more tech-focused, building trust by being super transparent and showing his deep understanding of the stuff he's talking about. Two different styles, both effective.
Exactly. Now, this leads us to decision-making, how these leaders navigated the, let's be honest, sometimes crazy world of business. The book gets into their different approaches to using intuition and data.
Yeah. Take Musk's decision to build SpaceX rockets in-house, to vertically integrate the manufacturing. Back then, everyone in aerospace outsourced that stuff. It seemed like a crazy risk.
It's interesting. It wasn't just a gut feeling. The book talks about how we did all this analysis, figured out suppliers were charging way too much. But then that leap of faith, believing they could do it better and cheaper themselves, that was a bold move. And then they proved it worked by iterating like crazy, building, testing, improving constantly.
And that one decision led to, like, a huge drop in launch costs, which changed the whole economics of space travel. That's the power of making those tough calls.
For sure. Now, think about Jobs and the first iPhone. He got rid of the physical keyboard completely. In 2007, everyone had BlackBerries with those little keyboards.
Yeah.
It was like he was ignoring the whole market.
Yeah, BlackBerry was king, and that keyboard was their thing. But Jobs wasn't ignoring data, not really. He understood how people wanted to use phones, envision this future without buttons.
Exactly. And it wasn't just a hunch. He worked with his engineers to see if a multi-touch interface could actually work. The data might have been iffy back then, but his gut feeling about touchscreens won out. And even when people inside Apple were skeptical, he stuck to his guns.
And the book argues that decision didn't just change phones, it changed a ton of other industries too.
So both guys were good decision makers, but they did it differently. Musk is more open about how he analyzes things, the data he uses. Jobs, even though he was definitely data-driven, presented his decisions as if they were just like obvious truths. You didn't always see the thinking behind them.
Right. Okay, let's talk teams. You can't build anything great alone. Musk and Jobs both had their own ways of building the teams to carry out their big visions.
Absolutely. Musk has this flat organizational structure at SpaceX. It's about cutting out bureaucracy and giving engineers more power. The book talks about how engineers can go straight to Musk with their ideas. They don't have to go through layers of managers like at other aerospace companies.
Yeah, and they're all in the same place. The engineers, the manufacturing, the testing. It makes communication and problem solving so much faster. And it's all about best idea wins, not who's the boss.
Right. It's a meritocracy, and tying everything back to that crazy mission, reminding everyone they're building rockets to, like, advance humanity. That's powerful. The book even says SpaceX does amazing stuff with a smaller team than the big players.
Now think about Jobs and the team that built the first Macintosh. That's a classic example of a small, super creative team. They had this pirate mentality, like they were rebels inside Apple.
Jobs was really careful about who he hired. He wanted people who were passionate, who saw tech as art, not just engineers. And he mixed designers, engineers, and marketers together, which was pretty new back then.
And of course, there was that reality distortion field thing again, pushing his team further than they thought possible, but also giving them a lot of freedom to figure things out. That Mac team, they set the standard for how to build innovative teams.
When you compare their team building, both guys understood the importance of having a clear mission to unite everyone. They both wanted the best talent, what they called talent density. And they both built environments with high standards, but also a sense of, like, safety to try new things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But their leadership styles were different. Jobs was known for getting into the nitty-gritty of product design. Musk sets those big engineering goals and then lets his teams figure out how to get there.
Exactly. All right, let's get real. Innovation means taking risks, and taking risks means failing sometimes. If you're trying to do things that have never been done, you're going to hit roadblocks. What matters is how you react.
For sure. Think about those first 3 SpaceX launches that blew up. For most companies, that kind of public failure would have been the end.
Those were some huge setbacks, technical, financial, the whole 9 yards. But Musk, right after that third explosion, he reportedly said, "I will never give up."
Oh.
That's some serious determination.
He didn't just shrug it off. Each failure became a learning opportunity. They figured out what went wrong, redesigned things, and kept those lessons for the future. The book even talks about the holy book of lessons at SpaceX, a record of all their screw-ups, and then, boom, the 4th launch works, saves the company.
Talk about pressure. Now look at Jobs with NXT after he left Apple. That was a big swing, but didn't really take off at first. He lost a lot of his own money on it.
Yeah, but the book talks about how he used that time to really look at himself and how he ran things, and he made a big change with NXT, shifting from hardware to software. That's where the real value was, and that's what led to Apple buying NXT and Jobs coming back.
So they both took big risks, and they both learned from failing. But Musk seems to approach failure like an engineer, analyzing the data to get better. Jobs, during his time with NXT, did a lot of soul-searching, which helped him understand the market and become a better leader.
Okay, let's talk about the customer. It's not just about making cool products, it's about getting what your customers want even before they know they want it.
Totally. Look at Jobs and the iPhone. He didn't do those market research surveys asking people what they wanted in a phone. He saw how frustrated people were with their phones and then made something so different, so much better, they didn't even know they needed it.
Right. He solved problems people didn't even know they had. And he was his own best customer, constantly testing and refining every little detail. It changed what people expected from their tech.
Now look at Musk and Tesla selling their cars directly to customers. He did that because buying a car from a traditional dealership is a pain.
They redesigned the whole process, took cues from Apple stores, got rid of commissioned salespeople, and the way they keep updating the car's software after you buy it, that's huge. And Musk talks to customers directly on social media, even uses their feedback to improve the cars. That's almost unheard of in the car industry.
Both guys looked beyond what customers said they wanted. They tried to understand the deeper needs, and they both used their own products all the time.
But Jobs was more about creating totally new things people hadn't even thought of. Musk focuses on taking existing things like cars and rockets and making them way better.
Exactly. All right, let's talk about networking. Building those key relationships is super important. No one succeeds alone.
Musk's whole SpaceX thing started because he couldn't buy rockets from Russia. That failure led him to build his own. And then he had to recruit the best people in aerospace and work with NASA. Even the way he worked so hard, like sleeping at the factory, that was a way of building relationships with his team.
For sure. And look at Jobs and how his connections helped him get back to Apple. His friendship with Larry Ellison, knowing Gil Amelio, the success of Pixar, reconnecting with designers like Jony Ive, all those relationships played a part in that crucial moment.
So they were both good networkers, but in different ways. Jobs was great at building deep one-on-one relationships. Musk's networking is more about achieving specific goals.
Yeah. Okay, last but not least, adaptability. It's not enough to just react to change. You got to be able to thrive when everything's changing constantly. That's super important in tech and business.
Think about Musk's plan to totally automate Tesla's Model 3 production. It didn't work, and he was quick to admit it and change their whole approach. That's a big pivot, learning from mistakes and adjusting on the fly, and then they made sure the whole organization learned from it.
And remember when Jobs basically killed the iPod by launching the iPhone? The iPhone could play music too, but it was so much more. That takes vision, and it takes being willing to disrupt your own success. And he made that continuous self-disruption part of Apple's DNA.
So both guys were adaptable, they made decisions based on evidence, and they could change things fast. And they both built companies that embraced change.
But they adapted differently. Jobs liked to plan those product transitions carefully, keeping everything secret. Musk is more experimental, making changes more quickly and publicly.
So to wrap this up, we've talked about visionary thinking, resilience, innovation, passion, communication, decision-making, team building, risk-taking, customer-focused networking, adaptability. Elon Musk and Steve Jobs might have been very different people working in different fields, but they both had this amazing set of leadership skills.
And as you think about your own path, think about which of these things stand out to you, which ones connect to the challenges and opportunities you're facing.
And here's something to chew on, building on that big difference we talked about earlier. Do you think your own approach is more like Jobs, adapting tech to meet our needs, or more like Musk, pushing the limits of tech to advance humanity? How does that core idea shape your decisions and your vision for the future?
And don't forget to check out the success index comparison in the back of the book. It gives you a more, by the numbers look at their impact, and it compares them to other leaders.
This deep dive is just a start, but hopefully it's given you some useful takeaways from your book. Thanks for listening.